There's a good point, to your point, in The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis, right? So that's where he's having, it's kind of like his version of Dante's trilogy, right? But he's having these conversations as he's kind of going through, and it's all these people that turn away from heaven, right? Hell's locked from the inside is kind of his thesis, that people choose things other than God. But there's one conversation that's striking where it's somebody who's an apologist, and he doesn't want to go to heaven because his whole goal is proving the existence of God. And he keeps going on about like this new theory, and Lewis is like, well, don't you want to go like, aren't you interested in checking out this mountain? Because he's kind of continuing on. And he's like, well, no, I got to get back and I got to write this paper. Like, there's this new group that wants to hear it, da, 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 da. So he's so consumed in his apologetic that he doesn't actually have faith.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. I just read The Great Divorce. Really liked it.
Oh, first time?
It's first time. Yeah. I tried to read it before, but it starts with like a Magic School Bus.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not reading a book about the Magic School Bus. But it turns out you need to get just like 2 pages after the Magic School Bus and it gets much better.
Yeah, people start fighting and all these human traits are kind of laid bare. And it's a beautiful book.
Yeah, but he does a great job of showing how people on Earth, right, choose hell. They choose separation from God. They don't want what God actually offers.
Yeah.
Right. They might want this rationalistic, like these proofs for God. Because, that's the American religion, right? I believe in a God, right? When I need him. What do they call it? Moralistic, therapeutic deism.
Yeah.
Right? Or deism. And so God's there when you need him. And then you get to go to heaven and so forth. That's the kind of God that people
where he gives you exactly what you want.
Where he
what
gives,
you think you want.
Where you play golf and watch the Bears.
Yeah.
Right?
Or that's the most striking one. Since when he has that conversation with the mother, and remember the mother's child died young. And I think it's her son, and her son is up in heaven. And she's like, well, why didn't he come down to meet me? And it's, I think it's like her brother or something like that. And he's like, well, you need to come up. And she's like, well, I'll only go up if I can see my son. And he's like, well, you might see your son at some point, but you first have to go see God, and she's like, I'm not interested in that. Like, I just want my son. And it's one of the most haunting ones because she turns back and all that's expressed is what you might often call like love for the son. But what Lewis is exposing is it's actually this desire to have her son for herself. And it's actually selfishness. But on the surface, it looks like what you would often call love, but it's actually a diabolical type of motherhood. Yes. And it's probably the most striking one of all the conversations because he's hitting on something that you're more courageous than me. Maybe you'll preach on that, but that's, imagine from the pulpit, talking about that.
Well, yeah,
but you could, but yeah.
Yeah. That's Luke 14. Jesus says right after he gives the parable of the great supper, the great banquet, he says, unless you hate your mother and father and sister and brother, you can have no part with me.
Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't mean you're supposed to hate them. That would contradict the fifth commandment and fourth commandment and all sorts of other commandments.
Yeah.
But what he's stressing is that sort of love, just this natural love for the child, which can be very beautiful, right? It's created into us, and it's supposed to be a reflection of the Father's love for us. It when corrupted, is satanic. It's absolutely evil, selfish, right? Because God created us for Himself, and every one of us. And so the greatest love that we could possibly have is to surrender, right, ourselves wholly, right, to this God, and that includes our family.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know we're kind of going off here a little bit from I want to get to kind of your formalize how you're working through this apologetic, but with that in mind, you can kind of connect that with, certainly some of the sexual things that are going on today. And we had John Davidson on not that long ago, and he made a pretty wild point where he kind of walked through and he's like, all of these arguments about homosexual marriage, or now it's getting polygamy or something called polyamory, I think.
Yeah.
Which is like this, like you can get 3 guys and 4 women that want to be married, and there's like these kids in the mix and all of this. And he's like, all the conversations are all about these appetites and desires, personal, like selfish desires of adults, and the kids get thrown into this, and no one ever considers the kids. When you've got 2 people who get divorced and then they go and marry someone of the same sex, and these kids are just traumatized, right? But that's what we call love, but it's actually the inverse of love. It's the selfishness.